Okay. Hello, welcome to iFalls News Let's Chat. I'm with my special guest, Beth Shermoen. She is the superintendent of ISD 361. We've been kind of having a little bit of a conversation to get started, and it's been lovely so far. And so now we're going to get the rest of you guys in on it. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Uh, this Let's Chat is going to evolve some. So as like the next one's going to get better. So if you think the sound sucks or you don't like the video quality, check back next time. I promise you it'll improve upon each time. And then we also, as it evolves, are going to try to get more interactive and integrate it more with iFalls News. Just make sure, like, if this one's not for you, if you didn't get out of it what you want, come on back and give us another try next time. Hopefully, after all this, Beth still wants to come back again later too, so we can have more of a conversation. But I did want to, before I even let you talk, do one little bit more, or one little more bit of housekeeping, which is explain that in this case, about myself and my relation to the school district was that I was on the school board for 6 years and the school board chair for three of which were through COVID, which was a lot of fun. Well, I guess I wasn't the board chair through all of it, but so some of y'all might remember those good times that we had together. So anyway, so while I was on the school board, I did do all my homework, and so I understand a lot of the basics, and also, I have kids in the district myself, and that actually don't attend, and we might get into that some, because some of the issues that we might discuss is enrollment numbers that are related to the 4-day week. So we might end up talking about that, but because it's a pretty complex issue. But let's just start with some of the details, I guess, about the 4-day, how it's going to work. So first, the proposal would start next year. I'm assuming it would be the goal, or would it be the following year that the proposal would end up taking over?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So right now, we're in the process of exploring, getting data from the community, doing some listening sessions, but the proposal is not necessarily to start next school year, so for
Okay.
the 25-26 school year, or even the following school year. What will happen is I will gather all the input from the community members, the surveys, the listening session data, and then I will be presenting that information to the board. In addition, the board's received a lot of communication for and opposing the 4-day school week. What will happen then is we're going to make a data-driven decision on how we will move forward in the recommendation. Right now, I see a stronger side for continued exploration. So, and that's one of the things I tried really hard to make clear in my last listening session
Mm-hmm.
is this is not set in stone to move the next school year,
Sure,
that
well, that's
there's
good to know.
still an exploratory process, which I possibly see as the outcome of this.
Sure, that's good to know, because in this community, people are quick to read headlines and maybe not dive a little deeper. So the fact that one of the main things when we were kind of pre-talking was about maybe some of the more controversial questions, and one of them being, is it a foregone conclusion? And so that kind of sums it up, is if it's truly still an exploratory process. I know a lot of people that reached out to me individually, and then of course what I was seeing online, that's what they were kind of nervous about, is that and I understand, if I'm being honest, where they're
Absolutely.
coming from, because being on the school board, a lot of the stuff was foregone conclusions. um Maybe not the controversial stuff like people may have thought it was. Maybe people had their minds made up by the time it got to the vote. I hope that they wouldn't just want to vote willy-nilly, and so maybe had all the information they needed at that time. But sometimes it does, when you have 7 people deciding the fate of 1,000 students. It can give off that vibe quite a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, I think one of the things, and I'm hoping through my arrival to the school district, is I've only been the superintendent of ISD for 7 months.
Yeah,
And
I was mentioning that a little bit, not to cut you off, but so many people, especially being me, they're always asking me what I think about your evaluation. And like, the honest evaluation is, how can you tell?
right,
Like, give her a chance, give her opportunity to try some stuff. fail at some stuff, hopefully less stuff than you succeed at, you know, and stuff like that. And so you're still definitely in that honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that to my point of like the that we were talking about earlier that people might not have heard is being in a first year is one of the things where I would suggest, again, just my personal opinion, that you really evaluate, you know. And one thing, and maybe you can speak to this. Here's my next major question before I cut you off. Sorry. Was or is the data. So the data itself. There are what is it, over 1,000 students? I mean, not 1,000 students, 1,000 schools or something like that out there that have already done this. Most in the Midwest, so rural like us. So that, you know, there's a pattern there. I like to look for you know, scenarios and stuff like that. Like we have Little Fork, just they're a little different than us. They have that sparsity aid, of course, which plays into this actually quite a bit. And federal funding on how, I mean, I think we should touch on that a little bit too later on. But anyways, my point that I'm trying to make is that I forgot what I was even talking about when I started. So anyways, it's give you a chance, and is a 4-day week a foregone conclusion, I guess, is to get back to my rambling.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, I want a fair chance, right? I am a born and raised in International Falls. I spent most of my life here in the business community, raised with my family. Had the privilege to go away and learn and listen from other school districts. But I think one of the things that my arrival, what has evolved out of this is an opportunity to have been a former teacher in this school district, a former student in the district, a parent of students in the district, and also have some strong community relationships. But with that, there are going to be fails, right? There, and I will be very transparent about that. There's going to be some successes, but I think one of the things that we have to really remember is the goal is to move forward and to really start dissecting areas that are deficit and we can do better, whether that's culture and climate, whether that is program offering, fiscal responsibility. And like you and I talked about prior to us starting this, is we have to look at all those variables and how they can contribute. What's the symptom problem? What is the root cause? And I appreciated that conversation.
Hope we can have some more as we get to know each other. So like we before this conversation, we're not friends. We like don't know each other really, other than, you know, interacting in the community here and there. So so our conversation beforehand was kind of introductory. I really hope that it continues, especially because I think that there's an opportunity for change with a new superintendent, a new principal, or, you know, new even structure in a lot of that. Absolutely. In the admin office, however, that ends up shaking out over the years and whatnot. But it's all new, and so new provides an opportunity for change. I don't like change for change's sake, actually. So like sometimes, and I see this in the 4-day school week a little bit. Like again, I don't have my mind made up. I don't know if I said this at the beginning of this video. I actually see value in the 4-day week and not in the 4-day week. I'm kind of indifferent on it. So I'm actually really looking forward to learning more about it. But I think that if we were looking at more of the symptoms, as we were talking about before, and it's an ongoing conversation, then it'll be more real that it's not just like a cloak and dagger thing behind closed doors. The community actually, like, you're going to always have like 10% of these people who are going to get pissed off no matter what. No offense to you. You guys can comment. But they're going to anyways. But the rest of the 90% is just like, let's just find some middle ground, but include us and educate us. And also in a way that like they have time for, you know, because not everybody has time to be a full-time parent. My number one grief, and I'm going to only rant about this for 1 second, is mandatory involvement for parents for sports. It drives me nuts because not every parent has that. And I think it's a problem with equality, but I also want to see, you know, it's also good because I want to see sports thrive. But anyways, that's just a tangent, that not all parents are in the same situation. And also, you know, we can segue back into this for the 4-day thing. Not everybody has the same financial situation. Not everybody has the same childcare. And as you know, in this community, childcare options are the options are fine. The amount of options is abysmal. And Bacchus has tried to address that in the past different times, I believe maybe during COVID or with how they were doing some preschool stuff. The ISD 361 had to address it. So for the childcare or the Friday, like what are some tangible things that if this happened, what people could expect? Like,
so that's a super great question and great point, and I think that's probably the number one area of concern for myself as a superintendent, our staff, and our school board, is we know that not everybody has the same luxury of just staying home on Fridays, and the reality of the childcare shortage across the nation is
yeah, it's crazy. It's such an economic thing.
It is.
And you know how you fix it? Pay child care providers more. They can watch like 5 kids or like, I don't know what the exact rules are. My mom growing up did child care, and like you're destined to be poor in this.
And
community.
the mandates are so
it's crazy,
unrealistic.
And
now.
like you have to be such like a certain type of personality to like I know like good example is, I don't know if she still does it or if she started back up, but like I saw how Tony Corpy had everything so darn organized in her house, and it was like you would have to be like this, you know, otherwise it's like you're done after like a week probably, because then you're gonna have some inspection. So anyways, childcare has its own problems, but those end up becoming your problems in a way, right? So you kind of have to also take over the hurdle.
So you know, one of my supervisors at one point was out of town working for a while, had said to me, you name your problems within 5 minutes, and you better spend your time on solutions. You need to be really breaking down those barriers. And I think for us, childcare, access to food.
Yeah, food was a big one during COVID. I learned about on how resilient people. I mean, not how resilient, how reliant people were on it, and like weirdly reliant, and that again is a symptom of this is actually one of the tragedies. It's a symptom of a bigger problem that isn't school related, but if you don't do that, it affects educational outcomes, and which is the ultimate goal, right? Is like to improve educational outcomes. So you kind of like have to do this nanny state thing to a certain extent, and for the greater good, because I don't want to get into societal collapse and how like the schools become the core of the community. But in a way, that's not a bad thing, because our school does have a lot of potential. So being the core of the community, instead of a church, which actually, in my personal beliefs, I think that would be a better option. Not for like a religious standpoint, just because everybody is related to the community school. Not everybody, you know, is related through church. So as that's changed, it's had its downsides, but I also see it as a very positive building block. Community education is a good part of that, and some of the different things you've been doing.
But that's one of the things that we're looking at. So for me as a new leader in the district, I've had to invest. I want to invest, and I will continue to invest, is listening to stakeholders, from staff, students, parents, and people who don't have children within our district. It's really important, and we've tried really hard to create that open door policy to make sure people know that, you know, we don't want to just hear all rainbow and sunshine, right? It's okay to have a difference of opinion. But when we talk about offerings, should the 4-day school week ever go forward, whether it's, you know, next year, the year after, or in the future, we have to have a true conversation about childcare and access to food. So just in my conversations with some of the other school districts that have that Friday or Monday off, those are the same barriers that surfaced immediately to the top. And some school districts offered childcare out of the gates, and then found that with time, families slowly left the childcare and they found different solutions.
I get how that would work out, like over time, like people, because you have your circles of support, and then because your circles of support grow, and you find out that, you know, a family member would actually be a great person to, you know, later on, and that actually they would enjoy it and it'd be a great situation, you know, and you bring it more, so your situation might improve, or, you know, the love that you can bring to the relationship with like having a family member or something is different than daycare. You know,
and then there's another district I just spoke with, Carleton County Superintendent. Had a phenomenal conversation with her. She has a great podcast segment that came out. Tremendous. I encourage you to listen to that on their 4-day school week. But what has evolved from their change is, with their Fridays off, they still have their staff still works.
Okay.
But what has happened is it's become a community center. So they're actually seeing one of their schools, that food, they're seeing people do tutoring, they're seeing access to athletics. So every school district has evolved into something different based on what their community really needed and wanted, with the alignment that how it also helped benefit the school district, finances, staff retention, student enrollment, and being competitive in a market where the draw from other modes of education, online learning, we had that conversation, online learning, PSEO, to families who opt to homeschool, it's impacting rural communities. And the superintendent group that I'm in and the other superintendents that I've talked to, this is not just isolated to International Falls. This is a real reality. And then you throw into the ring for us as International Falls Public Schools, and this being formerly on the school board, is we have buildings that were built, infrastructure from the 1960s, sure, and the upkeep of that compared to
I just remember Mr. Grover.
Like,
we'd be in a school meeting, you'd be like, shoo, he's got his keychain. Actually, my kids thought he was the janitor because we're like, it's like, what, how do you know that guy? He's the janitor because he always had his keys and he was running keys? And he was running to like put out a water main break or
it's
something.
It's one of the first
like
things I said to Kevin when I arrived. I said, Kevin, I am not carrying that many keys.
It was so ridiculous.
I said, I just can't.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it probably wouldn't look as good on you as maybe it did on him, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, but so interestingly though, you talk about stakeholders, and that's important to me, because I own a business and I need employees and stuff like that, but also because one of the things that I love about this community personally is that we are isolated from everybody, and which means there's not a lot of people coming up here to say, like, we have what we have and we're responsible for our own growth. I think that there are organizations like, let's say, KETA, that are definitely designed to pull stuff in and kind of, hope for a miracle type of thing. But I really think some of our best and brightest are going to come from entrepreneurs, or if there's engineering opportunities locally, or, like coding, computer opportunities, stuff like that. It's hard to get that going. They do exist, and we do have some businesses that are definitely on the come up on that type of stuff. And so there's potential. But what historically, in my opinion, that the school has tried to do, but like gloriously failed, except occasionally in healthcare, is that community collaboration. And so, for example, and I'm not offering as a tech business, I got plenty of stuff to do, but like a tech business could be incorporated somehow in a classroom, or I couldn't even begin to think of an idea on how it would work. But like you got welding. They did that green tech, I think, one time, which was super cool. I don't know if that's still going on. It might be over with it. I can't remember. I think there's a lot of funding to help with that one. But and then to capitalize on a lot of this funding, I know a lot of the work I've done in the community has been pulling in grant money, like Blandon Foundation, stuff like that. A lot of the improvements, technology have been as a result of that, and like the technology. But it always just seems like there's so much going on, and everybody has so much that it's hard to collaborate. And I know I was good friends and still talk to somebody from Kuchiching Public Health, and their whole thing was like getting people to walk to schools and stuff like that. It just like pulled up to prom, and you couldn't even walk on the sidewalk in front of the parking lot there. And it's like, there could be some collaboration there where like it'd be super easy to get a walk to school program going if people communicated, but not just that, felt empowered to communicate, and like encouraged, like, hey, which community connection did you make, type of thing like that. So something to think about. So
one of the things I feel very fortunate is what you're talking about is something I recurringly heard when I arrived from staff, from families who would like to see a greater partnership between homeschool, which is one of my beliefs as a leader, and even as a classroom teacher. It was, I wanted the local business in my classroom. I wanted my students also be within the. So I think that was one of the things that really excited me to work with the team at 3 kids that they were ready to expand some of the good work that they've already done, but to bring what they do well out into the community and have our kids exploring and spending time in some of our local businesses, but also bringing some of our local businesses within our school district, and then moving beyond that and getting our kids outside the area, because it's 2 hours to go anywhere, right? And one of the things that I was part of my entry plan is meeting with key leaders within our school, within our community. So, meeting with somebody from PCA, meeting with someone from the council, meeting with somebody from, Shannon's, talking to somebody from Voyageurs National Park, and making sure that we have partnerships with people within our community who support our school district, but also, we are educating the future, and we want our kids to know what is available, not only within their community. We want them to have the opportunities to explore and learn from the people within the community. We don't just learn in a classroom, and we've talked about that, is we need to spend more time outside of our 4 walls. Hence some of the great programs that you are going to see introduced within our system over the next year.
Yeah, cool. I mean, that sounds all very promising. We'll see how it all plays out, and I'm hopeful just for some change. I hope that you can get some of the staff on board for it. So back to the 4-day school week, just to bring it back. Literally, I could talk about everything. I do want to touch on 2 things. Besides, I guess, 3 things. So we need to touch on school attendance, but I think we should start with financial, and then also some of the statistics. And so we did start on the statistics, yep. But then I kind of probably got us off on a tangent again. That's going to be basically the takeaway from this show. This is what I'm looking at the camera now, is like, I can't hold a train of thought. So like, I'm sorry, like, Beth's been very gracious about that. And it is what it is. My brain's fried. It's all I got left. It's what I'm working with. So anyways, statistics. So one of the concerns I have about statistics, I watched your stand-up special. Just kidding.
One of my listening session presentations.
Your listening session. Oh my God. Couldn't think of it. Stand-up special. That'd be fun. I hope my son laughed at that. He's in the other room running the video. And so your presentation, and there's a lot of statistics. I have a problem with some statistics, not the ones you presented, just that they're new.
Because there's a lot out there.
There's a lot of new ones out there is the thing. There have been some case studies. This isn't brand new.
Right.
So it's not like like Little Fork started last year, this year, whatever it was. They're not. There's people who've been doing it for a lot longer, and there's other types of schools that have been more experimental, that have been doing this stuff for a while too. So there is like some, maybe not data where you can firmly draw conclusions to be 100%, but you can definitely make some assumptions based on this data. So I have a little bit of a problem with the newness, and then just as there's this great book called Proofiness. And basically, after reading it, I was like, I'm never trusting statistics again. That's not quite true with the takeaway, but like, you could pick a different statistic and show something different. So, but so some statistics to think about that I noticed is attendance improves. Test scores don't move much, is what I've seen. So what do you think about that with attendance improving, the limited statistics? And also, unless you've seen a different statistic too, that might suggest otherwise with test scores. But and I hate to like go by test scores, by the way, but you got to go by something. It's a standard metric. And like the state, that's like how they do everything. So you're a product of the state. So so anyways, that's what are your thoughts on that, I guess?
So I guess when you talk about the 4-day school week and some of the statistics and research that's behind it, it's fairly new, although it's not new. I think, in my reading that I did, the first 4-day school district was established in 2009, I read, for Minnesota. And then we ended up having, we had a number of schools try it, a small number in Minnesota, and then MDE pulled it back because of the academic growth. They did not see the patterns of the trends that they would like to have seen in math and reading test scores, in which were measured by. So then with time, MDE, the commissioner reopened it. But I think when we talk about the data component, when you talk about the financial alignment, you talk about the attendance alignment and not seeing the growth that we would like to see. And especially in our district, I mean, because that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, specifically this. We don't care about the rest of the place.
Right. So for me, I have to tell you that is a priority to all of us, but we have to identify all of the contributing factors to why we're seeing, why we're not seeing the movement that we need to see. And you know, I'm very transparent when we talk about that. And I talked about that in my interview is we have to talk about the school attendance, and we have to talk about the tardies, because if kids are not in their seats learning the grade level standards, and I've said that 1,000 times, but there's other contributing factors to that. School culture and climate, student engagement in our classrooms. What does our core instruction look like? What does our intervention model look like? And what does our enrichment model look like for those kids that, you know, have mastered their schoolwork? I think,
and competing against national culture too, which is
against
social
also,
media national culture, which is
and
its own beast.
Social media, that's a whole beast in itself. We're competing now also with AI. We're competing with kids.
I have some very strong thoughts on AI. We don't need to go dive too deep into that.
We may have to have another session.
Yeah, but you definitely should be using it to educate your students.
Absolutely. And I think the other piece too is I, as a leader and a former teacher and a parent, have very significant concerns about cell phones in our schools and in our classrooms. And I think there's a time and place for them. But again, you know, looking at that alignment of what variables are contributing to proficiency and the track towards growth. I also think we have to have a greader investment across the country, but in the state of Minnesota, on early education. I'm a firm believer in that, because the reality is too, Ted, and I think you know this, is students are not required to be in school until they're the age of 7.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of weird rules. There
is. And so when you think of that developmental early education time that we could have with our students, just on play-based learning, structures and routines, you know, thinking about letter sound relationships, there's so many factors, but attendance, there's an underlying cause of school attendance: culture and climate, engagement, home life, you know,
home life's a big one for sure, especially we live in a community. It's not as poverty stricken and as boom and bust cycle as like some on the range, you know, that they can get riding your bike down that path down on that range. It'll show you some of those towns that are struggling, and so it's not quite that. We have some stability. It seems like all the regression from PCA, their last huge layoff, it's all stabilized or whatever. We still have population that decreases 10 to 20% every 10 years, which is another huge issue for you guys, because you guys have a weird math problem where your numbers don't divide good by 2 and they don't divide good by 3. And what that means is you have too many kids if you have too few kids in a classroom if you have 3 teachers. Well, not too few. Actually, there's statistics that literally say like more than like 17 or like 15 is like too many kids, by the way, which for funding wise, don't get me started on that. Like, it drives me nuts. Like, so anyways, but that's not, I mean, it's your problem, but not something you're going to fix. So anyways, this has a big funding component, which is transportation based. And there is, you provide transportation out to Ash River or just Captogama?
We provide, and I don't honestly, I don't know the exact answer to that, but we do go to the perimeter of our district, so out to the Captogama area. They have a pickup outside of the Little Fork area. But one of the things, and that goes back to attendance, is the enrollment piece. Is you know, we have approximately 183 to 190 students. That has grown and grown. Post-COVID, it's exponentially increased because of the educational modes kids can access now today.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that too a little bit. Just so in my personal opinion, my son is not there because of culture. We can talk more about it at a different time. I don't want to get too personal from myself, but it's definitely culture related. And so the 4-day school week to me The things that it's going to try to fix are a symptom. For example, my son now, you don't get $10,000,
Yep.
right? Unfortunately, people ask me, and a lot of people do this. Like I asked another parent who had their kid online that I respected before I put him on. I didn't ask the right questions. So actually, I'm a little bit better at like coaching parents when they ask me about it, but I don't recommend it actually. So the reason why I don't recommend it is because it's very unstructured. My wife had to work very hard. Like she was gonna like, I'm not gonna say murder my son on camera, but like let's say it was adjacent to that, and because how little effort he was putting into it. So we've always had a great respect for teachers. She definitely does more so now. And we gave him the ultimatum essentially, like get your shit together, or you have to go back to public school. And he does enjoy doing the online school in the different way that it is, but it's not a superior learning,
Correct.
in my opinion. And I think you probably even statistically look it up. The problem is you have your statistics will be skewed because the kids are you're reducing from a different, so you're getting the fringes from school districts. So you'll be getting more of the weirdos, maybe or whatever that are not coming to school because of culture reasons, of not feeling safe or whatever. And some of it can be built up in their head. Like sometimes like a kid just needs to I hate to say man up because that's a terrible thing to say for a kid to do. But like have a little bit thicker skin. And I know so public school will give you that, but also like too much sometimes. And that's like, so going back to the online schooling, is one of the things I tell people is that he doesn't do a lot of schooling. It really is not a lot. And I'm like, why aren't you in school? And he's like, yeah, there's no class right now. He's already done his homework. It's not challenging. It does challenge him in some ways, but it's overall not challenging. But the correlation I make is, of course, now he has a great support system with my wife and myself, and we're always educating him on everything. And like the kid's got hope, so I'm not too worried about it. But other kids who went into that same situation without that same support system, they will fail. I guarantee it. It's not good. So you also have a lot of wasted time at a school with transitions and stuff like that, and how long a school day is, and bringing it back to the 4-day week. This certainly ties into that on how the schedule can be an advantage. But one thing I would say is if we're looking at symptoms versus actual problems, the culture in that hallway in between classes can make it darn near impossible for a student to transition back into learning, right? Like if they just got called a name or bumped into by a big kid in the hallway, I'm not thinking about what my math teacher is saying. And as you were saying with the 3-day thing in your presentation, where it takes time to catch back up, that kid's not present there during math, forget it. Like math is the worst for
Absolutely.
that. Man, I wish math didn't have to be like that. I don't know how else it could be where it doesn't build on itself, but math sucks for that reason. Yeah. Like you miss out on math, you don't know what happens in Europe for like 20 years. Who cares, But like, so math's a tough one.
Just to go back to your conversation about the culture, and for me, my arrival within the district has been, and in the community has been, I'm humbled and I'm grateful. And I know that the work is not going to be easy, but I can assure the community that we're going to do it together, because the excitement and the talent that I see within the district.
You guys got some.
I'm excited at the future. I think some tremendous things have been established. I look at, I say this in every presentation, what they've done with the READ Act and moving forward with literacy. International Falls is ahead of most districts that I've worked with, and I don't know how this statement will be received, but my philosophy has always been, whether I was a classroom teacher or a business owner, my classroom, my business, the school district, school, your building leader is as good as the leader.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about
it. Your leadership sets the tone and the trajectory of where you're going to go. And when I was a classroom teacher, I felt the same way. My classroom will be as successful as I make it. If I don't create a space that my kids want to come and learn and grow socially, emotionally, academically, I shouldn't be teaching.
Yeah.
And I look through that perspective the same way as a superintendent. Is the culture and climate of our district at the end of the day is on me. And I think the district has come together and we are ready to move forward in a new direction. And what they've done they've done well, although there's changes that we have to make. We have to talk about what do our processes and procedures look like. We can't just provide sit and get learning experiences. And if you have not followed our social media page, what our kids have been doing over the last couple of weeks with our classroom teachers and fielding out into our community and expos and community education, the excitement and the momentum is there. And that's one of our taglines right now is future forward. Like, we cannot continue to teach like we did 30 years ago. And we have to change what that looks like. Otherwise, we will continue to have students leave our district for growth academically, mental health, wellness wise. Sure. I mean, that's go to the state site and look at the Minnesota Student Survey. It'll break your heart.
Yeah, well, those little kids are going through a lot. And coming out of COVID, which, I mean, was a whole, a traumatic thing, regardless of like whatever school you went to, the culture and everything during that time was so hot. And there's a collective conscience that I believe in, that like as a society, as a micro society in International Falls, we kind of all feel that same stress together. And there was definitely a lot of that. And so it's cumulative, and it also, can carry through generations. And like that trauma, it was pretty, it's definitely real. And to just say like, grow a pair, man up or whatever, it's not enough, because that doesn't, if your end goal is the outcome of educating the student, whatever your personal beliefs actually don't matter if they're working against that ultimate goal, right? So it's like, let's say for example, and I don't do this, but you should have religion in school or whatever. Well, if that ends up screwing over all the kids, then it's not a good thing overall or whatever. And that's just an example. We don't need to get into religion. I'm way off topic. First thing that came into my brain anyways. So anyways, back to the earlier point about the culture and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to seeing how it shakes out. I think that the test scores for the district are below the national average. I think that you have some room for improvement on there. I think some of the kids that you might be losing might be those high achievers, believe it or not. When I first came onto the school board, we were losing ALC kids. And so we really went hard on that ALC program, got a little rocky at first, and we stumbled. Kids were maybe, we were being too stringent, too lax. There was like that perfect, like finding the right balance of it all. And then it ended up working. I don't know if it actually, to be honest, I don't know if it's still working. But for a while there, it was actually beautiful. And like, almost like you walk into that room and it was like a Disney movie. It was like so heartwarming and stuff like that. So in that same sense, if we're talking about finances and you're losing kids to online school, I necessarily don't think that the answer is to do more online stuff. Some kids might be like, if they have actual learning disabilities, need like different things like sensory, and you might not ever be able to accommodate some kids, right? Like maybe that is the right environment for the kid. I'm here to tell you it's not for most kids. Like it's definitely not.
You're right, because we have kids, and we learned all this during COVID also. We have kids who thrive online. We have kids that absolutely thrive. We have kids and families that opt because of their experiences, right? We have kids that opt to go to post-secondary.
That's what I was actually going to get at.
Yeah, and we have to remember that our ultimate goal at the end of this, and I talked about this earlier in the year when I started at 361, is we've got to have a greater conversation about enrollment and retention. We have to figure out the root cause. So one of the things that I've done as the new superintendent is I've been slowly eking at calling families and talking to them, because I truly want to know, why did you leave International Falls Public Schools? Was it an experience?
Tell you, just to cut off, and then I'll only be quick on this one. A lot of those parents have never felt heard. So yeah, or they heard their grievances were listened to, but not like understood and interpreted and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and I can tell you, for regardless of what the reason is behind it, that's their own story. And I truly want to know, because if there's something that we need to fix, and if there's a pattern that starts occurring, our school district as a whole has to have that honest conversation. It's important to the board, it's important to the staff, and when we start talking about the numbers, they're significant numbers, and that those numbers not only are tied to what is the true why behind it, but they're tied to dollars, over $1 million. But the other piece that I would say is we have to have the conversation of what are we missing that we're not offering kids.
Yeah,
to
and
make
so
them
that'd
the
be a
most
post-secondary
yes.
kind of conversation.
And then when we talk about, you brought it up, a great point is some of our best students, some of the kids that have gone through their entirety at ISD, received their education, we are missing the opportunity for them to show what they know.
Yeah.
And so, and this is a true data point. We have approximately 100 students. Their families have opted them out of taking the MCAs.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one.
And
I've wondered about doing that. I've considered the pros and cons of that myself as a parent, because my kids get stressed out about it, and I'm like, I mean, do your best, but like,
so
who cares?
And that's exactly right. So for us, it's not about, we want mastery. We want you to show what you know.
Yeah.
Where can we do better? Where are we doing really well? Let's break down those standards. But the other piece is when people opt out, it's an automatic 0 for the district.
Okay.
So that is very concerning to me, because I don't think it's a true snapshot of what is actually occurring in the district. Because when, can we do better in core instruction? Mm-hmm. Can we do better in intervention? Can we do better in project-based learning? Absolutely. Can I do better in many facets as a superintendent? Better as a parent, right? But I think we have to really start drilling it down to all the contributing factors of the why. School attendance, academic, end results in MCA. We're talking about people that opt out. We have partnered with the college this year. How do we get those, PSEO kids to come back and take their tests? Because do we want them in the school for their 11th and 12th grade? Our school district? Absolutely we do. But if their family opts for a different avenue, we had them for 10 years.
Yeah, the interesting thing about PSEO is it is a statewide and maybe even a national thing, but it's definitely statewide. Yep. But we are actually an anomaly in how many people take advantage of it, compared to other places with similar markets like Bemidji. When I was on the school board, I forget how many we had. They had like 3 or 4, like for the whole school. And some of that is since we're smaller and we have less resources, it's a resource, right? So historically, the two things have been like working against each other, in my opinion. I know the superintendent very well, or not superintendent. What is he now? Actually, like now that they merged and everything, I hate to say it, but I don't know if he's less important in the scheme of things now, or if he's just still like, this is my college. Yep. I'm not sure the dynamics there. But anyways, this wasn't him, and I'm not blaming him at all, but because he's actually newer to the position too. Fun fact, maybe I shouldn't say the fun facts. He did his interview for his job in this basement because we had good internet. And anyways, so I already spilled the beans there. But there's been historically this weird feeling of you're stealing students from us. So that is happening though, so it's not like it's unwarranted. All these kids are actually, every kid is a $10,000 bill that leaves the district. However, what you're competing with is the very common sense thing of they get an AA degree. College is crazy expensive. Every person who goes off to college gets screwed. My daughter right now is like, we're actually don't have a lot of money. Like we do not have means to like pay for my daughter to go to college. We weren't smart enough. Like we were young, dumb, and married, and like had kids at 18 type of thing. So we didn't have the same maturity and planning as other people. She's like just doing all this and being, the resident advisor and like doing all this extra like volunteer, anything she can do to like get more money for college, and she's doing great. But she is ridiculous. She's not a normal human. And she's really not as crazy. When we talk about statistics and skewing, I did the math one time. She had another friend who's now in Harvard or Yale, I forget. her mom was also on the school board with me, a good friend. And I did the math. I'm like, if they didn't go to the school, if they got pulled out, the test scores would go down 4%. Yeah. Like, that's a huge amount for 2 kids to like just affect it like that.
And it impacts test scores, it impacts finances, and it impacts culture and climate. You know, every student that leaves a school district, that's a loss for our school community. We want our students, and even, you know, we want people to come and have their educational experience at 361. I think we offer a tremendous educational platform, and I think it's going to get even better. I really do. But every student that or family that opts to walk out that door, it impacts a number of different areas. Hence, then we have to have conversations where we have to talk about 4-day school weeks. We have to talk about creative solutions. But with that doesn't mean we are not committed to excellence in education.
Yeah, so I don't want to talk, like, I know like it might have seemed dire, but that's not actually, to get even before we started having this meeting, like in the message, I have a lot of hope in the school district personally, because I know the teachers and they are ridiculous. And I've said this, there might be a couple that are not great, but like those teachers come and educate in like the crappiest of conditions, not school conditions, not like support conditions, but maybe they might actually feel that. But like the culture for educators is so terrible nowadays, with like parents that are just ridiculously like on their kids' side and not on the side of their kids' personal growth or education. And it blows my mind. So in my personal opinion, to start fixing it is you need to start having teachers have complete control of their classroom type of stuff. We're talking about the cell phones. Get rid of no cell phones. You see a cell phone, you get detention, you know? Not to say, so I also brought up, and my wife would definitely bring this up because she is a worrywart, is that if my kids didn't have a cell phone in class, she would be very nervous, because we've had lockdowns here. You know, I was a school board chair. Well, we've had a few of them, bomb threats, lockdown, whatever. And it's terrifying. I lived a block away from Columbine when it happened. I was in a neighboring district there. That was one of the feeder schools. And like, it is truly dramatic.
Well, and you're right, because outside of the academic aspect of education, school safety is the number one for staff,
and unfortunately,
students, families, and community, and it has to today, right? Yeah. So I think you're right.
Yeah, and I don't know that like that there's a right solution, or you know, whatever, to the cell phone technology or whatever, but technology, like, people get upset with me sometimes because I overuse AI, but they actually just have no working. But it's like anything else, it's a tool. So if you give somebody, like, people ask me a lot, like, what do I use for this or that, and my son will be like, what do you use for hacking, right? Well, you don't need anything. Like, you can literally, you have the entire information of all of humanity, and now artificial intelligence past humanity in your pocket, right? But that is terrible if nobody's ever been like, this is how you consume education, this is how you learn, these are fallacies you need to look out for, these are, you know, like that type of stuff. And so instead of maybe like having more classes about how to use it as a tool, when I came up, we were typing. Like, that was it. I don't know what they're still doing. Kids can't type anymore. They can do this though.
They can do that.
But, yeah, and there might be something to that.
But you're seeing a huge investment by education. Start talking about AI. You're seeing, and it's starting really at the top. They're working with superintendents. They're working with school boards, and it's filtering down, because it's a conversation we have to have, because we know it's going to ultimately impact education both positively and negatively.
It could be so positive if you don't measure stuff the same way. Like, if you don't count cheating as cheating, you know, because obviously they're going to plagiarize. So let's teach them to plagiarize with the right stuff, pull in the right data, get the right thoughts, interpret the data, things like that, and not just blindly like, here you go. You know, like, okay, so now you gave me that. What's that mean? You know, stuff like that. Because I grew up with Google, and so like, I'm like, oh, I got to Google the answer to that. Or now we have Alexa in our house. Well, if it's simple, we'll ask her. But like my son, he'll be like, the first thing he does is ask ChatGPT now. And because it thinks and conceptualizes more of what he's actually tried to ask, other than getting him a bunch of crap, you know? So sometimes he does it. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. You just immediately thought that. He had to stress test the computer, and he used ChatGPT to write Python code to run a bunch of calculations all at once. And he didn't even know what to do that beforehand, but he was like, how should I do this, AI? And it was teaching him how to do it. And so anyways, you can do that, or you can be like, do a history report, and then there's your history report.
And it comes down to teaching, reteaching, but we have to teach the people that are supposed to be teaching the work how to adequately use it, and they can use it to their benefit too. They can build rubrics. The capacity of what you can do with AI, but we have to do it right, just like cell phones. And we have to have
it could be.
Yeah,
you don't just like take it. And so that's one thing. A lot of people in like the general public, and not to again go too much on an AI tangent, is they're like, well, what happened? It was supposed to be this big thing. Well, what happened was the public didn't take it on. The experts did. And so the experts are using this to change the systems that they're the experts in. And so like I've been studying law a lot. I have no interest in being a lawyer. It's the worst thing in the world, it sounds like. But I've been studying law a lot. So then when I'm researching legal stuff with AI, I have that foundational knowledge of like law. So my questions are relevant. And like I know the fundamentals and the building blocks of it, so that I'm like, okay, at least I know what questions to ask. But if you're not asking the right questions, you're just cheating, or not using it to its full potential. So, but yeah, it can do. I mean, I need a lot more employees than I have, and I'd love to hire them. And AI and the code it's written and stuff has allowed me to stay in business, essentially. So I'm really passionate about it. We're actually one little side thing, one more. Small town tech, we're going to start exploring helping businesses, like, because they have an employee shortage and stuff like that, which the school it'd be great if they could help address some of that as well. My personal belief on the education system overall is that it's flawed fundamentally because it was made to create factory workers in a sense. And so kids have to sit down a lot and different things like that. So I'm going to bring this back to the culture. I'm not just rambling. To me, one of the most impactful memes, pictures I've ever seen, and I mean, if I was a dork, I'd get this thing tattooed on me. And it was, they are having a tree climbing contest. There's a monkey at the top. There's a fish in the fishbowl. There's all different types of animals. And they're like, first one to the tree gets an A. And to me, that's been education too much. And I know that like, it's not entirely true, but it adds a scale on like a national level. To me, that is actually kind of true, minus Title I stuff, which we can bring that back to funding if you want, and we can also wrap up too. So I don't even know what time it is. So it's up to you. But you're also going to be coming up with some being a very weird spot for the first time in history, where there's not going to be a federal Department of Education. So how is that going to... So you can imagine
what our superintendent meetings are like.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't even know what that means, and neither do you, obviously. And like, I know, and I'm not going to get political. I know, like, this is a hot button issue for people here, so I'm not going to say anything against Trump or anything like that. But it is willy-nilly on how they're doing it, right? Like, and so they're really just like, that's it, And so
I think
without being strategic about it, it makes it difficult.
And there is the true underlying issue for us as school districts is we don't know what this means. We think a lot of it will
terrible for schools.
And you're already living with the bare bones in education. You're living with the bare bones in rural America, because we don't have the access to opportunities like metropolitan areas. But right now, with the dismantling of the Department of Education, the question marks and the gray areas are sitting out there. And as leaders, we are very concerned about what that means for all of us, but most importantly, the school districts that we lead. And to even think about the possibility of losing an ounce of funding in any capacity when it comes to our students with
that budget's tight.
It's our,
so the budget, if they ever have money, they are only allowed to have 3 months worth of operating expense. And if they have more than that, they're breaking the rules because
Yep.
they're supposed to use it to educate.
You have to
So-
live within this spectrum of
Yeah,
dollars.
and so like there's a window, like if things change outside of that 3 months, you get screwed big time.
Yep.
And then you end up doing, going for referendums early or
Correct.
different things like that. So
Yeah, and you know that federal money, like Title I funding.
I do actually have a question about that. If you could maybe clarify this, I'm unfamiliar with it. And what I remember is with the Title I funding, this national government mandates like everything. Like you have to do all this stuff, and they underfund it, right?
And they
way. So under or unfunded mandates, there's a lot of those. What people might not know related to this is that the majority of the budget comes from the state, and like the vast majority of the budget. That's actually why Minnesota has one of the better education systems, is because they invest in that. It's not the best. In some ways, it actually might be, depending on how you rate stuff. But it generally ranks relatively high because the state funds a lot. Our current governor and all previous governors are like, yeah, we're fully funding everything for Title I, whatever. That's been like their mandate. But it does. So that's why I was wondering, I guess, is it actually as big of a deal? Are you losing that funding? Do you even know if you're losing that? What is it, 20%,
so
17%?
Right now, there is an executive order that has come out regarding DEI. We have 10 days. Our school districts have 10 days to sign a specific order.
Oh yeah,
Otherwise, we lose funding.
Oh my goodness! You probably don't want to get into that right now, but
I can come back and we can talk about that sometime, because I feel very passionate about that area. Equity is important.
I am definitely all about equity, and I've lived all over the United States, and I've been the only white kid in many of the schools I went to, and I love it. I actually, one of the things, and this may be reverse racism, I don't know. I miss diversity actually in my everyday life. I still have friends from like the military and people that I talk to and whatever, and it's just like so mayonnaise up here sometimes, So anyways,
but you're going to see it tied up in the legal system, but you're also going to see significant pushback from school districts for the fact that all students have the right to access education, and they all have the right to come to school and feel safe and welcome and included. And all students have the right to have the interventions that they need, the special education services that they need, and the enrichment that they need, because we have some students that have mastered grade level benchmarks. And sometimes we get so focused on the intervention portion that we forget that acceleration portion. So I think what you're going to see is some legal aspects that are going to tie a lot of things up, but to suffice the moment, I think you'll see districts have to do some things to make sure their bottom line is met, so they can continue to provide the services that they've provided.
Which is like, again, so the budget is it's so tight. That's one thing. Like when I was on the school board, we passed every audit. Stacy Grover was the main financial person, and she was very uptight about finances. I mean that in the best regards, because that was literally her job. And the only thing we ever got flagged on was that she was married to the superintendent, and that was a big deal. But there were safeguards in place, so we had to do extra stuff or whatever for that. But one of the extra things we had to do was I had to be on top of the darn budget way more than probably your current school board members are, because of that conflict of interest. And there again had never any reason to believe anything. So it's just get audited.
We're in a the former leadership team of the district before I arrived, they've left us in a great position. When you look at school districts across the country, and even ones close to ours, I mean, you look at Hibbing, you look at Duluth Public Schools, they have got to make $1 million cuts, and they're laying off dozens of staff members. International Falls is not in that position. Now, if we don't continue to change the trajectory of how we're doing business, 5 years from now, we could have to make cuts. That's why we have to be talking about enrollment, retention, educational modes, looking at CTE and trades versus just a college.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could add economic development, which is that trades, part of it too, and add that to it, because it's not your responsibility to grow this community, but geez, it would sure help,
And we have to do it together.
Yeah, for
we have
sure.
to do it together.
Yeah, definitely. Especially getting the right stakeholders and getting the egos to the side. I haven't, picked up on much of that from you at all, but historically, like, I mean, you see this with the county and the city with the police department, right? And or whatever, jail, police, whatever it is. Anyways, um, like it's so weird sometimes. It's like I always thought about this growing up as a kid, and this was naive, but I was like, why don't those presidents just talk to each other, or something like that? And it always drove me nuts. And now I realize that there is more to it, but like really, they could probably just talk to each other and sort this all out. Our fate's all in like 20 people's hands, and locally, our fate's in very few people's hands too. And luckily, well, maybe not. I guess that was probably not the right way to say it. But you're definitely going to be one of them going forward, especially like superintendents are usually around for a while. Hopefully, like the last thing you want is revolving superintendents.
Well, and I'm committed to the district, and I will not do everything perfectly, and I will promise to commit everything I've got as a leader, but I have to do it with the people. I have to do it with, we have to do it together. It's not going to be,
Well, you can't come in and like you're the hammer and everybody's
exactly.
the nail, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts of that school, and a lot of people that matter. First off, everybody matters, but like, there's the unions, there's the financial side of it. You're not. What I found in leadership is you're responsible for everybody who's underneath you, but you almost have no control over like how they're going to end up being, and you're literally guessing like when you're hiring people a lot of the time because you don't know who they fundamentally are, and so until you like get to that, that's go back to the culture thing. I guess we can wrap it up, but today I chose to dress a little bit like Mr. Rogers, and he's a personal hero of mine. And they did a movie recently, and Tom Hanks plays Mr. Rogers. And there's this scene, yeah, and there's this scene, and you're watching it, and you're like, and Tom Hanks did great at this. You're watching it, and it's in the diner, and you're like, holy shit, I just felt that, right? Like I felt that what just happened. And imagine being around Mr. Rogers. I never met the guy. I've read his books and stuff like that. But that's the power a teacher has, like an educator has. When you talk about the culture being the person, that's at the head, it truly, truly is. And I don't want to dive into like the old culture, but when I would travel to all the school board conferences and I'd be talking to the other board members, the other superintendents and stuff like that, you could tell who was tore up, like who just was like did not have their act together. I want to say Virginia was pretty bad, or maybe it was Masabi. One of them was like, "Oh my God, this is awful! Like you guys have no clue what's going on."
Yeah,
a lot of egos.
That for me, and I think I would say on behalf of the district, that is, and we are committed to changing the culture and climate of the community. So when you walk into Falls Elementary, or you walk into the ALC or Falls High School or even Bronco Arena, we're committed to making sure the facilities are clean, that they're welcoming, but also that when you just walk in that building, that you feel like this is a place that you want to be, and you just know that the culture and climate is a positive one. And do we have work to do? Yes. I mean, I will never say that we don't. We have work to do in many aspects, but we will do the work, because I think the board and the district as a whole is committed to it, and it's what we owe our students, and we owe our families. And I think a school district is a pillar of a community.
Oh yeah, for sure, especially nowadays, more than it's ever been.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that investment is critical, and I really look forward to seeing where we're at in a year or two from now, and 10 years, I hope I can retire saying that.
I'm hopeful. And honestly, I would love it to be in a situation, and my son, I think, would too, where, where it made sense to send him back. And that was a family decision that we made or something. So I think there is opportunity. It's going to be hard to communicate that. Oftentimes people left for very personal reasons. And once you make a personal decision, facts don't matter as much anymore, and for a lot of people. And so you got to get back to like, you're going to have to prove to some of those people. And now that's different than PSEO. Again, we're talking two different things because they're doing it for different. which is ultimately what you got to get down to the bottom of. And with this 4-day school week is what is fundamentally causing these statistics to be this way. And I again still am undecided. The 4-day school week could be the solution. It could be. Community wise, you're going to have some work to do. I think there's a lot of, I always liked when I worked in the mill when we worked more hours and shorter amount of days, because then I had to have more family time. And you have those weird transition times where like you have wasted time in the day. So I actually personally, I enjoyed back when we had weird schedules, because it was like sweet 4-day weekend, 3-day weekend. Then you'll still have those extra long weekends too sometimes. I do wonder about like the transition back into after the 3-day week. Has anybody ever tried splitting it in half and having like a midday week, or is that ridiculous?
I haven't heard that, nor have I seen any of that in my research. Most of the school districts that have applied to MDE and been approved, they have taken the day with the highest absenteeism. So it's either generally on a Friday or a Monday, Monday or Friday.
I suppose Wednesday is the best attendance.
Yeah,
and you said that in your
Wednesday and Thursdays have notoriously have the best attendance in our district. What that looks like for others, I don't know. But I think when we talk about closing it up on the 4-day school week, I want to just say I appreciate the respectful conversations in posts, and I appreciate the letters that have come in. Valid points. We hear you. We're an open book. We want to meet with you. We want to talk to you. But I appreciate the respectful conversation. I'm not afraid to have tough conversations, but I want people to know that our doors are open, and we are willing to sit down with them and make the best decision based on what's best for kids and our school district, because we want to continue to grow and thrive and create more opportunity versus having to pull back opportunity. And we can't do that without growth, but we have to be committed to what's the reality of what does growth look like and where do we need to improve. And I think you're going to see that we're very committed to that.
Well, that all sounds great. I'm really looking forward to seeing how everything shakes out. I would invite you back as frequently as you want. I don't know how often I'll end up doing these, but like for real, I enjoy these conversations. I think my hope is that Let's Talk and iFalls News and me in general can kind of become a communications platform for more conversations like this. Because when I watched your presentation, and I watched the entire thing, I was like, man, and I didn't used to be like that, by the way. So back in the day, I would have been like, okay, I gotta watch this whole thing. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of talking. Can we get to the point? Can we get to the meat of it? How does this relate? It was very dry. It had to be because you're doing a presentation in front of a bunch of people, and you were about to break into smaller groups to have more meaningful conversation. So,
and you're trying to answer the questions that people want.
Yeah.
You're getting the questions via email. You're seeing them online. I want you to respond to this in your presentation. I need this answer. And that transparency piece is really critical, because the other piece is I don't want people out there misunderstanding. For example, we are going to 4-day school week for the 25-26 school year. That is not factual, that's not a fact.
Sure, yeah.
So I think for me, I'm the same way. Presentations.
Yeah, they have their place, and if you're in that room, you actually feel different about it, actually, and stuff like that.
But the small group sessions were where some of the greatest conversations evolved and were facilitated by our staff. But the honest conversations that evolved, and the way people collaborated and talked to each other, we left with some really good data, some really good questions that we have to answer, and we just really appreciate that from the community. I used to always tell Harley, the previous mayor, that he had it easy, even though we had the similar budgets, because nobody gave birth to speed bumps, right? Like nobody's like, that pothole's mine, It's like, no, that kid is theirs. Like everything that they believe in life, and that's precious to them, you have essentially, right? Which is crazy that's even like a responsibility, but people still step up and do it, and a lot of good ones too. And that's why I'm very hopeful, is that if you empower teachers to take control of the classroom and really feel like they can be not goofy, but like engaging and like, be themselves and whatever, and like let their freak flags fly, or whatever version of their nerdy dorkiness is. I'm sure there's some teachers that aren't nerdy.
but in general, right? So they bring that passion because whatever they chose that discipline because they're actually into it. Nobody becomes a math teacher because they hate math, like, right? Like they're weirdly into math. Mr. Avi was always good about making dorky stuff like interesting and stuff like that with his dumb jokes always, I remember. So but like there's a lot of that where you can make some, and some people maybe didn't learn because math again is one of those things, but like you can make that stuff interesting, especially like I try to make math interesting for my family because I'm like, oh, there's all these connections and it does this and it's this type of, whatever. And so but like I get passionate about it, so they get excited about it. And teachers, I'm not saying that they're not passionate or they're not displaying that in the classroom. I just feel like the culture has beaten them down so much, and COVID didn't help anything with it. And the more we can do to empower our teachers, and give them like the ability to think outside the box a little bit individually, would be definitely beneficial to the culture. And then so anyways, that's my main takeaway from all of it. Do you have anything else you want to add? I mean, I don't even know how long we talked for. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just thanks for the invite. I know I was your guinea pig for this big event.
Well, you're a great guinea pig.
And so. I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you and have this conversation with the community.
Yeah, I know a lot of people will be interested just because I'm critical of the school on a lot of stuff, but I'm not critical of the school because I don't care. Like I'm just not a straight up asshole about it. Like I'm so invested in this community. I'm not going anywhere at this point. Like this is it. And which is fine actually. I shouldn't say this is it. Like it's like, oh, this is it. Because this is a beautiful community. We have so much to offer. We have so much going for us. But like somebody needs to stick a boot in our ass and just be like, work together and like do this and like stuff like that. And it's possible. And I'm still hopeful because as long as we're still here, there's hope. And not only that, but like in the school itself, let's say you have over 200 kids not attending the district. Well, you have 200 opportunities, right? Like that's 200 funding opportunities right there. And not just like to think kids are numbers, but like when we're talking about fiduciary responsibility, that's what you got to think about.
Yeah, and too, I think just to wrap it up on my end is we talk about the culture and climate for our kids, and I would say that goes through as far as our staff, the culture and climate for our staff. It matters to them too, and to our families. I mean, you want to walk through that door and know that you're seen and you're heard, and you have the opportunity to bring your best self forward. And it's important that we also have teachers, professionals, and our facilities team. Are they in positions that they're most passionate about? Like you said, if you put an English teacher teaching math, how much passion and excitement is going to come out of that space? So that we are invested in making sure we're positioning people in the right positions to make sure they're best versions of themselves working with kids.
Again, not to draw it out too much, but you did spark a memory of mine from the school board that I'd like to share really quick. I was talking to a teacher who was an exceptional teacher, hands down, probably won awards, all kinds of, I don't know. She was great. This person was great. It wasn't a she, it was, whatever. Not to identify this person, but she was so amazing as a teacher. And I said, you got to come before, I didn't say you got to, I said, would you like to come before the school board and talk about some of the stuff that you're doing that's good? And I was so shocked when she was like, no, I don't feel comfortable because I've been burnt before. And I was like, oh, teachers think like that? I never really, I got there and I was like, let's go team. And some people are like, hey, we got some memories, some of those people that maybe they had the feud with, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but maybe they were still on the board or maybe they weren't. I don't know. But it was like, there was a lot more to it. And I'm like, oh, wait. You're one of the good ones and you feel this way. And then I started hearing more of it from like what I would consider some of the, I don't even want to say that there's top tier teachers or not because they're almost all great, but like the ones that stand out for like that are always, doing on the social media posts and stuff like that. A lot of those people were also dissatisfied and it was so cultural, and they might still be. So I don't want to speak for them. I'm not saying everything's rosy for them. But like it was really shocking to me as a school board member, and like really just a kick, like, oh, I got to take a step back and there is underlying issues here. And it really was kind of like I was not ready for it, which was weird just because I had so much respect for this one teacher, and like they made an impact on my kids' life and other people I know's life. And I was like, oh, but they were still teaching, you know, and so I had hope, you know. Yeah.
Well, in my team that I work with, they'll tell you my statement is, with change comes great possibility, and we have to live in a position of hope, but we have to implement that with action and get behind it as a community.
Yeah, you got one foot up in the clouds and one on earth here. Yep. So
thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I guess that concludes it. Sorry if you're still listening, like good for you, I guess at this point. I know we kept it interesting anyway, so you're probably still listening. My person who's stopping it probably already left, so I'm gonna have to get up and stop it. So you all take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.